Story 1. The Aqua Teen Hunger Force Cologne movie for theaters is available on Hulu. I recommend it if you are already a fan of Aqua Teen Hunger Force. If you are not, I do not recommend it as it may be weird and confusing. Story 2. Daybreakers. I liked it. I wouldn't really recommend it as a must-watch, but it was fun to see a different approach to a vampire movie. Story 3. Halloween 3. Season of the Witch. It wasn't good, but it was definitely watchable. I only realized recently that it borrowed heavily from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Story 4. I rewatched The Social Network for the first time in 10 years. It's fantastic and surprising to see how much Facebook has declined since then. Story 5. Captain America. Brave New World is entertaining, but I wish they hadn't revealed so much in the trailers. I would give it 6.5 out of 10, and I will rewatch it once it's available on Disney+. Story 6. Nobody with Bob Odenkirk. I had never heard of it, but since I like Bob, I decided to watch it. It was fun, like a working-class version of John Wick, with fewer deaths and more substance. Story 7. Last I finished. The Dreamers. Last I saw Howard the Duck. Both are enjoyable if you have an open mind. Story 8. Gladiator 2 would have been better if Denzel Washington played his character from Training Day. Story 9. I rewatched Idiocracy last night. I recommend it because it can teach valuable lessons about the current political climate, even to the most basic individuals. Story 10. Dune 2. I watched Dune 1 before it to understand the story and the characters. I was impressed by Timothy in the second film. I'm not a science fiction person, but I enjoyed both movies. Story 11. First Blood. I was pleasantly surprised by the emotional ending, where Rambo experiences a psychological breakdown. It is rare for a 1980s film to critique war and our treatment of veterans. I was disappointed to find that the subsequent films did not continue this theme and leaned more toward propaganda. Story 12. I rewatched Malcolm X last weekend. It's a great movie, and I definitely recommend it. Denzel Washington deserved an Oscar for his performance. Story 13. 12 Angry Men. It definitely resonates differently as an adult compared to when it was assigned in high school. Story 14. Flow is a Latvian animated movie with no dialogue, relying entirely on visual storytelling. I definitely recommend it if you love animals. Story 15. A Fistful of Dollars is a Clint Eastwood spaghetti western. I love it. A Fistful of Dollars for a few dollars more, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly are all great films. Story 16. My husband and I watched The Thin Man for the first time last night. It was fun. Great humor always holds up. Story 17. I just watched Identity from 2003 for the first time today. I went in without any prior knowledge, aside from the brief description. I love discovering great movies I haven't seen before, and this one has made it to my favorites list. Story 18. Nosferatu. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I would like it, but it is such a different horror movie compared to what has been released in recent years. It almost feels like an old horror film. I found it to be creative. Story 19. In Too Deep and No, Stay Far Away. If you want to see Richard Dreyfuss in a shark movie, just watch Jaws. Having seen Jaws on opening weekend back in 1975, realizing now that the movie is 50 years old has caused me a great deal of pain. Story 20. Pulp Fiction again. Unfortunately, it was a censored version with no swearing and no content removed. I would absolutely not recommend that version. Story 21. Maximum Overdrive. I would only recommend it to those who are completely inebriated. Imagine a 1950s horror comic book turned into a low-budget late-night television movie directed by an inexperienced filmmaker. Story 22. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is similar to the other Mission Impossible movies, and I enjoyed it. It may be about 30 minutes too long. I recommend it if you like the spy action genre. Story 23. Casablanca. I highly recommend it. With my new television, it was like seeing it again for the first time. The details were so sharp and clear. Story 24. Nosferatu, or however it's spelled. It was okay. Not as scary as I thought it would be and a bit predictable. Story 25, Parasite. This movie received many positive reviews, but I have mixed feelings about it. The story was interesting and unique, but it felt slow at times. Story 26. My friend came over the other night to hang out. He mentioned he had never watched The Big Lebowski before, so I put it on without hesitation. Story 27. Scarface, 1932. It is definitely different from its much more popular remake from 1983, but it is also very solid in its own right. Story 28. Conclave. I would recommend it. I'm not a fan of the Catholic Church, but it was an interesting and enjoyable watch. Story 29. It's not a film, but a series titled Wyatt Earp and the Cowboy War, as well as a wonderful documentary based on true events. Story 30. I watched Bullet with Mickey Rourke last night. I recommend it if you like older movies. It features Tupac Shakur as the villain. Story 31. Arrietty. If you enjoy anime or The Borrowers, I recommend it. It's also suitable as background noise. Story 32. The Sadness. There is nothing noteworthy or any real story, just some individuals expressing pent-up thoughts through artistic cinema. Story 33. Vision Quest is a great movie about a high school wrestler training to defeat another wrestler. It features a little love story and a fantastic 1980s soundtrack. Story 34. Harvest of Fire on Tubi features a great cast, including Patty Duke, Lolita Davidovich, young Jennifer Garner, Eric Mabius, James Reed, J.A. Preston, and many other talented actors. It was a good movie with an interesting plot about an Amish community. Story 35. I recently watched Clone Cops. I would absolutely watch it again, but it's not very good. It's just a weird, fascinating train wreck. It kind of reminds me of The Room and The Disaster Artist. Story 36. I didn't know what to expect from Blue Beetle due to my near-total unfamiliarity with the character and the fact that DC's cinematic track record hasn't been great. But this film was a lot of fun. Story 37. Bike Riders was cool. The Chicago accents are hit or miss, but I would still recommend it. I might watch the movie 2 or 3 more times. Story 38. Captain America, Brave New World. It was very good, with a satisfying ending that I wish could be replicated in modern-day America. Story 39. I couldn't finish The Gorge. As soon as they weren't fazed by the tree zombies the first time, I was taken out of the movie instantly. Story 40. Piece by Piece is a documentary about Pharrell Williams, created entirely with Lego. It is truly impressive. Story 41. To All the Boys I've Loved Before. It is really good, you have to watch all the movies. I binge-watched XO Kitty afterward. Story 42. A Complete Unknown. It was okay. Timothy was extraordinary, it looked beautiful, and the music was great. But there wasn't enough story for my liking. I recommend it as a musical experience, rather than a biographical film. Story 43. Transformers 1. I loved it. It's a very condensed origin story that managed to include a metaphor related to Jesus. Story 44. I recently chose to watch Suzum. As a father of 3 boys and a husband whose wife doesn't care for movies, I don't often pick what we watch. The first third to half of the film was enjoyable, though a little cliché. However, I really appreciated the second half. I would recommend watching it. The soundtrack was incredible and the visual art was top-notch. It was humorous to watch the middle climax of the movie and say, "There goes the animation budget." I would gladly watch the main character anytime. I would be lying if I said the final segment didn't bring tears to my eyes. Story 45. I have been watching a lot of found footage films over the past few days, so here are my recommendations. Butterfly Kisses, The Tunnel, Engangium, Haunted Asylum. Story 46. The Lost Girls. My friends and I were arguing over which film we thought was the worst. I voted for Iron Sky, another friend chose The Lost Girls, a third selected The Last Airbender, and a fourth picked Dragon Ball Evolution. We agreed to watch all 4 films to determine which was truly the worst. The Lost Girls was terrible, by the way, but Iron Sky was worse. Story 47, Bridget Jones, Mad About the Boy. If you're expecting a light-hearted romantic comedy, then I wouldn't recommend it. It's depressing and tragic. However, if you're okay with the whole franchise pivoting from a fluffy comedy to a somber story about life, loss, and grief, then go ahead. Story 48, Paddington in Peru. If you liked the other two Paddington movies, you will love this one. I give it a perfect score. Story 49, The Cave is a good action horror film. You should check it out if you have the time. Story 50, The Thief and the Cobbler is meticulously animated, but the story is meandering and odd. Story 51, Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. It's a good history lesson but a bit long, and I think most people would lose interest. Story 52, I just watched Slipstream with my friend. It's a 1989 film featuring Bill Paxton and Mark Hamill. I do not recommend it. Story 53, Red vs. Blue, Restoration. Yes, I recommend it, but it won't make sense unless you watch the show first. I only wish that Rooster Teeth had stayed together long enough to develop it further as one or more seasons. Story 54, sure. I recommend Venom, The Last Dance. I enjoyed it, but I absolutely disliked Venom, Let There Be Carnage. That movie was so bad it should have never been made. So try to forget about the second movie while watching this one. Story 55. The story behind Nike and getting Michael Jordan to sign is interesting, as well as its impact on the company and the entire sports apparel industry. Additionally, the Nike CEO donated billions back to the Pacific Northwest and overall seems like a genuinely good person. Story 56. Gladiator 2 was not engaging at all. The entire plot was ridiculous. Story 57. Fly Me to the Moon. Put it on for my mother. She'll appreciate it. It wasn't amazing, but I enjoyed it more than I expected. If you're looking for something I would insist you watch, try Nosferatu. It's gorgeous and weird. You'll love it. Story 58. The Gorge was exactly what I expected. If your options are 1. Waiting in a repair shop reading 8-year-old magazines, or 2. Waiting in a repair shop watching The Gorge, go ahead and watch. Story 59. The Cleaner with Daisy Ridley is a generic action movie. It is not terrible, but it may not be worth going out of your way to see it. Story 60. The 2025 version of The Wolfman features great performances by Chris Abbott and Julia Garner under the skilled direction of Lee Hwanel. I had to look away a few times when the violence became too intense. Story 61. Flow is absolutely the most visually beautiful and emotionally moving movie I have ever seen. It is astonishing. I was crying through much of it, and I am not usually one to cry. It is nominated in 2 Oscar categories, and I hope it wins both, along with possibly some additional categories if the circumstances are favorable. Story 62. It had its moments. I got a few good laughs, and Joel McHale was perfectly cast. The plot was predictable, but overall it was entertaining. I definitely didn't go into the movie with any idea that I would be witnessing Putty and Deadpool kiss. That's for sure. Story 63. Heretic. My wife and I have been discussing it for days. I highly recommend it. Hugh Grant is amazing. Story 64. In my opinion, it is the best movie to come out since Parasite in 2019. Everyone should see this film. It is appropriate for all ages and is truly phenomenal. Story 65. It was the last movie I watched on Amazon before I began boycotting the service. I highly recommend it. Kate Winslet was amazing, as were Andy Samberg and Alexander Skarsgård. Story 66. Quigley Down Under. It has been a procrastination movie for years. I finally watched it and would recommend it for the most part. Story 67. I watched Suzume for the first time and enjoyed it, but not everyone likes animation, so I don't know if I would recommend it. It's a cute movie, though just a little fast-paced. Story 68. The film on Netflix featuring Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal is titled The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I watched it at work, so I was paid to see it. Story 69. Dinosaur Valley Girls. If you appreciate visual appeal, 8 out of 10. If you value plot, story, and character development, 2 out of 10. If you enjoy humor, 4 out of 10. If you like budget stop-motion dinosaurs, 7 out of 10. I am not a fan and do not recommend it. Story 70. I watched it with my wife the day before yesterday, and it completely moved us. We were not prepared for the overwhelming emotions that the movie evoked. Story 71. Inland Empire. I'm not sure if I would recommend it generally because David Lynch's unique style is an acquired taste. However, it is a good film, and if you have seen other unusual films by Lynch, such as Lost Highway or Eraserhead, or if you liked any of the versions of Twin Peaks, then you might enjoy it. Story 72. Heart Eyes. Yes, I recommend it. If you want a fun horror comedy to watch, this movie is for you. I thought it was very enjoyable. I loved it. Story 73. The Crow was okay. Sometimes I just want a movie to entertain me without having to think about it too much. Story 74. Fast and Furious 6. When I was sick, embarrassed me at first while watching it with my wife on her phone. It had some decent parts, but it also contained the cheesiest moments I had ever seen. I wanted more racing rather than heist themes. Story 75. I just finished watching Seven Samurai for the first time, and it may be my new favorite movie of all time. It's an absolute masterpiece, and I will be rewatching it soon because it was so good that I want to experience it again. I plan to encourage everyone I know to watch it with me. Story 76. Comically Invited or something like that with Will Ferrell. I would only recommend it as a background movie. It is not his best, but it is not terrible. Story 77. The Sitter, 1991. Honestly, I was highly entertained. I would recommend it even though it's a cheesy B-movie. It delivers what I hoped it would. Story 78. Особенности национальной охоты. I had to watch it for my Russian class. It was funny in a humorous way. Story 79. I watched I'm Still Here. The acting and the story were great. I can see why it was nominated. Politics can bring out the worst in people. Story 80. Constantine. My first rewatch since it was released about 20 years ago still holds up very well. It is definitely worth watching. Story 81. Prey. I watched it for the second time recently. It is a very good take on the Predator franchise, which had been struggling in the last couple of releases. Story 82. The Monkey is definitely recommended. It is gory but in a hilariously cartoonish way. It is not scary at all. Story 83. I think the last movie I watched was Interstellar. Normally, I prefer silly B movies like Starship Troopers, but Interstellar is a solid watch. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.